want to say like my first crush was probably Robin Hood in that cartoon. I don't even remember the movie now. He was just so hot in that little hat. No, cut that out.
I guess I'm very lesbian in that way. I've always got to fight the urge to U-haul.
I would just like admire them from far. Felt like I'd gone through like a portal of my life into a new portal.
She teased me like crazy. You think she knew what she was doing to me?
He keeps coming back to visit me and all these different boyfriends throughout my life.
My first crush was Hercules, and then also in Hercules, second was Hades. I remember looking at him, he was a villain, which was like, ugh, I love bad guys, which is why I'm single, because I've got a toxic love language.
The actor in 10 Things I Hate About You, Julia, I don't know her last name. Sorry Julia, I forgot your last name. Steins? I loved all types of rom-coms, early 2000s rom-coms, late 90s rom-coms, and constantly had crushes on absolutely everyone who wore like low-rise jeans.
The first celebrity crush I can remember having was Alicia Silverstone, probably because Clueless would have been out and big at the time, and my sister was probably watching it a lot, and I was like watching it but pretending not to enjoy it because that's not a boy movie.
The Kim Possible was like one of my favorite shows, but it wasn't even Kim that I had a crush on, and I think this is where my love of toxic women started.
I'm really struggling to remember my first queer crush because like we weren't allowed to have crushes when I was growing up in a Chinese family. You're supposed to study and do well in exams.
My first crush was when I was 11 years old. And it was, a boy in my school. He was a year above me. And I had the most breathtaking crush on him for years. When I used to talk to him when I was 15, he looked completely bored. And that's when I knew he wasn't ever going to marry me.
Do you know where he is now?
Yeah, I stalk him on Facebook. I do. I stalk him on Facebook. He lives overseas. He's a lawyer. He's got kids. And he's still handsome. Even then, I had good taste.
My first crush was in year 3. He was this person I could never talk to. And he sat a few tables over, but I always wanted to sit next to him. I always wanted to play around him and do all those kind of things. And I scratched his name into my wooden pencil box, pencil case. And to the point that the teacher even thought it was his.
I love having a crush because it means it can be secret. So while you're coming to terms with your identity or you're questioning, you can crush on people for free. Nobody needs to know.
Love is something else for me. And that kind of, I grew up with that in my family a bit too, that yes, we feel love because you're meant to. But the way I've articulated love has been complex my whole life.
And if you don't mind me asking, where does that complexity come from?
Oh, that, let's call it inability to love, is because I don't, the inability to love for me is some kind of chemical thing in my body. I don't know what it is. And it's a self-protection because of, years of being protected. Oh, when I was growing up, my favourite song was Simon and Garfunkel, I Am a Rock. And I would sing that song to myself on repeat. I am a rock, I am an island, because a rock feels no pain and an island never cries. And there was a sense of always protecting yourself in that environment. So I think there's something that is inside me for that.
I think for many of us growing up, we have to hide our feelings that we have for other people.
I have my best friend and we
you know, grew up in high school, and then a third friend joined our friend group, and I grew a crush on her whilst I was dating my first boyfriend. But yeah, this was like a very important crush, and it like was very specific in my mind, and it taught me a lot.
First time I fell in love was with my partner Andrew, and this was really a crazy time in my life. We met 3 months after my HIV diagnosis, and that was about 5 months after I'd come out as bi. So that year, like, you could tell a lot was going on. And so to have someone come into your life who sees you for who you are, who doesn't judge you, and who just gives you unconditional love, I am so lucky, and I cherish that.
I guess the first time that I like fell in love after coming out would be with my ex Jen, who made me feel like just this gorgeous, like, great woman. It was cool to like finally be like, I'm in a like queer relationship. Be like, this is my girlfriend. Like, I am her girlfriend. It's good to hear those words said aloud about you. Searching for that label was like a big thing for me, because to that point in my life I had only ever been someone's boyfriend and I'd never been someone's girlfriend, and I really wanted to be that because I wanted that on my record. And now I've been two people's girlfriend, so that's nice.
I'd broken up with my first boyfriend from high school because I just said, I was like, I know I'm queer, like, I need to go explore that. And then he was like, yes, okay. And we parted ways, and then in that small town that I grew up in where there's not a lot of queerness, I obviously did what everyone does, and I went on Tinder and I put girls only. And then I met my first girlfriend.
First boy kiss, okay. No, didn't work for me. I almost felt attacked, but this was not, it wasn't an attack, it was just a young man who was clumsy and didn't know what the hell he was doing, just like me, and he just took a shot, if you like. But, you know, the eel in your mouth and the, oh gosh, and the spittle and oh no, smell. You know, he didn't smell right either. Didn't smell right at all.
I was like, oh my God, this is how people feel all the time when they're in love? Is this what what people who are like secure in their sexuality feel? Because this is amazing and doesn't compare to anything I felt ever before. It's not like when I was dating men that I didn't love them or didn't like them. I still had really deep feelings for those people, but it's like a drop in the ocean compared to what I felt with my first girlfriend, for example.
It felt so right though. Like, you obviously get really scared for those first queer experiences. It's like so daunting to like even think about, and you like almost want to vomit like thinking about it, leading up to it. Like leading up to the first kiss, I was like, I could literally vomit right now. But then we kissed and I was like, wow, this is great. It's normal, it's beautiful.
The way I've described it, I can really only describe it because I was able to compare it with something else later, which was, you know, when my first kiss with a woman. And that was like a whole different universe, completely. It wasn't just a kiss with the parts of our body that touched, it was just my whole body sort of was on alight.
I had a boyfriend that I'd met on Grindr, where everybody meets their ex-boyfriends. I met this guy online, and we decided to go out on a date, and it was the first time I'd ever like openly discussed going out on a date with someone publicly. And so the first intimate act we had was he held my hand when we first met, and I remember feeling so confronted by it, but also really like, this is nice.
And how did it feel experiencing that for the first time?
I felt selfish because I was doing something for myself, you know, and I think majority of the stuff that you feel like when you're coming up in a Pacific household around shame or guilt is like you feel guilty that you, like if I'm doing well, so say for example, me being able to go out and have a touring life as an artist, you know, coming from the area that I come from, you know, there was a degree of sacrifice that happened for my family to be able to do it. And I remember agreeing to go out on this date and thinking, oh my God, thinking about my mum going, my mum never went on dates with my dad, you know, or my sister can't go on a date, she's working so that I can have this opportunity. Like my brain went to that place first before it thought about anything in terms of pleasure.
When I came out to my girlfriend, she broke up with me, like straight away. Told her on Tuesday, she moved out by Friday. And that was, you know, that felt like a pretty big rejection of like who I was fundamentally as a person, so it hurt a lot and took a bit of therapy to get over. But, you know, and like, she's not a bad person or anything like that, but like there were probably elements of it that like she could have handled better, there were probably elements of it that I could have handled better.
My first queer heartbreak hit really hard because you feel these emotions so deeply, because it's like maybe the first time that I felt like somebody really saw me for who I am, and then when it all breaks apart, it can really feel like it's the end of the world, and you're like, will I ever find someone like this again, or are my other relationships going to be as impactful and as deep and as beautiful? And it was scary going through that for the first time.
This was a person that I really felt that it was forever. I was, you know, very much in love with this person, but it was a time when we were experimenting with relationship types, if you like, and the idea of marriage and monogamy was seen as very unfriendly to women, and that these were patriarchal institutions that were set up to keep women under control. And in fact, in those times it was. You know, you couldn't have your own name. You belonged to somebody. You were Mrs. John Smith rather than yourself. You couldn't have a bank account in your own name. You couldn't own a house in your own name. You couldn't take out a loan in your own name. If you were a teacher, you couldn't teach once you got married. I mean, there's tremendous restrictions on women then, and you know, obviously a long time prior to that. So a very important part of women's liberation was to break away from marriage and those kinds of one-on-one relationships. So we started experimenting with not monogamy. Well, you can just imagine how that went.
Very particular relationship that comes in mind. And I dated this person for about 3 years. And when they broke up with me, I think I used to describe it to my friends. Like I remember describing it to my friends when it happened, and I was like, it feels like physical pain. Like it does not feel normal. It doesn't feel like a normal level of sadness that I feel like I can get over. Like I feel like my heart, like there's needles in my heart every time I breathe. Like I miss her so much, and I wanted it to work out so badly. Everyone has that one queer first heartbreak and they just lose themselves when it happens. But for me, I think what made it worse is that I was with her in a time where I didn't even know who I was. So when she broke up with me, I felt like I had lost everything.
My partner at the time was attracted to somebody else, and they slept with each other, and I could not handle it at all. My politics out the window, you know, personal is political. Yeah, that really broke my heart. Yeah, that was a big one. And I just went downhill, you know, I didn't look after myself. I fell into a deep depression, and I just lived on tea and cigarettes. I must have stunk, you know, like I was walking around, tea and cigarettes. I smoked packets of cigarettes a day. It was terrible. She and the person that she'd slept with went together to the Mardi Gras that night. I was going to go, but because they were going together, I didn't go. And They were arrested, went through that whole business with names in the paper and losing jobs and all that. Pretty romantic thing to happen, really.
I fell in love with this man when I was 23, and I loved him breathtakingly, you know, and I'm not sure that I even enjoyed sex with him. I think I was more, you know, that I loved him so much that I would have done anything for him. So, yes, and he broke my heart, and I've never really been one for relationships since that time. You cannot force someone to love you, no matter how hard you try. If he doesn't love you, he doesn't love you.
I think my first true experience of heartbreak when it comes to like queer relationships was my first relationship with my first boyfriend. When he cheated on me. The way I would describe heartbreak for me initially, and I think in most cases, it's always been humiliating. You know, because I feel like when you open yourself up to someone, just in general, like friend, loved one, romantic love, you know, you're allowing them to sort of see or experience parts of yourself that you only let certain people experience. When someone abuses that trust or like doesn't respect a boundary, you know, it is really, I've always found it really humiliating.
I don't usually cry, and this is one of the very rare events where I've cried. When I've cried in my life was when I left home to move to Australia. Yeah, leaving my family behind, my grandma and my mom and my siblings. It was really hard. I felt really guilty as well, and that's the Asian guilt, leaving my family behind, you know, especially when I was away, when my mom got sick. She was diagnosed with cancer, and during her chemotherapy, she unfortunately had a stroke, and people didn't think she was gonna make it. So I tried to be there for most of her doctor appointments, but living the furthest away, I wasn't able to be there with her. So I feel like heartbreak for me is something that I experience every time I have to say goodbye to my family. Every time they visit, every time I do a video call with them and I have to hang up. Yeah, I experience that every time.
Tell that person to not be afraid to love again, because I think that's probably the mistake that I have made, was that I was far too afraid to be hurt like that again. Now I'm just far too selfish. It's like, no, I'm not sharing my wardrobe. I'm not sharing half the bed. I'm not washing your dishes.
Don't worry, this is better for you. I think that's what I would say, because as it turns out, it would have been, it was better for me to not continue in that relationship for lots of reasons. When you're heartbroken and you're in a deep depression, there's nothing much you can say to someone that's going to bring them out of it. They just have to go through it. You just have to live it. That's probably important to say to anybody who has depression. It's rotten, it's terrible, but just hang in there. You know, you'll come out of it.
I would have said like, hey, it's gonna be a long time till you feel okay again. I know it's hard to believe, but this is actually a really good thing, and she wasn't meant for you, and you're gonna find someone who was meant for you, and they're gonna make you feel a whole different way.
To be honest, I wouldn't know how to advise my younger self about heartbreak, especially when it comes to family and loved ones, because it's something that I still experience every day. You know, being in Australia and being so far away from my parents and from my siblings. If I can just like see them more often and I don't know how to end this part, but I don't have any advice for my younger self because I probably still need advice right now.
Just because you felt this like deep connection with someone for the first time and it's like you're missing puzzle pieces or something like crazy and romantic like that, that doesn't mean that it can never happen again.
I would say don't waste your time. Don't waste your time on someone that doesn't respect you in the first place. You know, your feelings are valid, but there are more important fish to fry.
I'm so good at handling these things now, but I remember I'm like, oh, I'm 23 now. Like, you know, there was a time where things like took so long, and my favorite way to like understand that it will go away and like everything's temporary is that I see thoughts and feelings as like something that comes into my head and then it goes out and it's done. I try really hard. So I would, say young Seren, it's literally gonna go away eventually. So don't drown yourself in it.
If I was to go back and talk to my younger self about heartbreak, about love, I'd say if you can't find the language of love for you, you've got to make your own. You know, the absence of it is not going to be good enough. It will not serve you long term. And if you are in heartbreak, it is because you have loved and you have tried. And that's really important.